Welcome to Inclusive Cyber, your front row seat to understand how a diverse mix of voices is not just necessary, but essential to protect our most sensitive computer networks and personal data. I'm your host, Dayna Martinez, and through my podcast, we shine the spotlight on the heroes and trailblazers from every corner of society who are redefining the diversity, equity, and inclusion frontier. Every episode is a step towards a cyber community that's as varied as it is united, where everyone has the keys to unlock their potential and the power to protect our digital world. Join us on this journey where every listen, every share, every dialogue inches us closer to this new reality. In this episode of Inclusive Cyber, I talk with Dr. Dayna Martinez, an industrial engineer and former professor. She shares her journey in education and the impact that she has made in the field, which has been far and wide. And the great thing, she is just getting started. She emphasizes the importance of mentorship and curiosity in pursuing a successful career. Dr. Martinez also discusses the challenges she faced as a woman and Latina in a technical profession and how she overcame them. She highlights the work of the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers in promoting diversity and inclusion in STEM fields. And one of the key takeaways is how representation matters in technical professions. Would love to get feedback on this episode and any previous ones. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Enjoy the episode. Dr. Martinez, welcome to Inclusive Cyber. So excited to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm super excited to be here too.
I pinged you on LinkedIn, and that's how we initially started this conversation. Just super impressed with your background. I know you are currently working at SHPE, which is the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. And I know we're going to go into that particular role later on the show. But can you tell us who Dr. Martinez is?
Yeah, of course. So, my name is Dayna Martinez. I'm originally from Puerto Rico, where I was born and raised. My background is actually in industrial engineering. So, did my bachelor's in Puerto Rico. From there, I moved to the United States, specifically Florida, where I was at the University of South Florida, where I did my master's and PhD in industrial engineering. From there, I stayed in academia for a while. I moved to Boston. It was too cold, where I spent about 9 years in Massachusetts. And I worked at Northeastern University. I did my postdoc with the Healthcare Systems Engineering Institute. And then I was actually a professor for about 6-7 years in the Industrial and Mechanical Engineering department. From there, I moved back to Florida. It's one of those silver linings that came with the pandemic. My family was able to relocate back to sunny and warm Florida, where now I work with SHPE. And I've been with SHPE since the summer of 2021. I actually have an article in LinkedIn where I talk a little bit more about my career path and how I hate that question about where you see yourself in 5 years, because I've never been where I see myself in 5 years. I've been always at a different, better place that I could imagine for myself. So lots of twists and turns in my career. But so that's a little bit of who Dayna Martinez is.
I love that, Dr. Martinez, especially your value system when it comes to education, right? So kudos, mechanical, industrial engineer. I can't even comprehend the amount of commitment and grit that you needed to accomplish that.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I tried to be a computer engineer at the bachelor level, and it just destroyed me. So kudos.
It's never too late. Never too late.
It's true, but no, you're right. It's never too late. I could be old and gray and still try to get my bachelor's in computer engineering. So just amazing background. So I guess one of my first questions is, why engineering? And can you kind of walk us through your mindset, young Dr. Martinez at the time, to say, hey, I want to go to school, but then not only do that, go into a field where super technical.
I think it all starts with my parents, right? And the high value that they have on education and how there was no question that I needed to go to college. Like that was not up for debate or negotiation. You're done with school, you're going to college. What are you going to study? That's another story, but you're going to college. So then thinking about what was I going to school for, I always try to be very careful on how I word this because I don't want to say that you have to be great at science and math in order to do engineering, because that's not 100% true. You could struggle with these subjects and still be a great engineer. You just need to be curious, want to solve problems. And for all of those courses, there's always a lot of help along the way for that. But I was very good at math and science since a very young age. So I knew I wanted to go on a field that had to do with math and science. When I was growing up, and this was many years ago, when you were good at math and science, they always told you either be a doctor, and I say a real doctor, one of those that cure, or go through engineering.
Obviously, from an ignorant standpoint, looking at industrial engineers, my perception just went to like construction or architecture type of thing. So it's really interesting that the versatility, that's something that I was not aware of. Then you also said something that is really close to my heart about being curious, right?
Right.
Asking questions. And I know from an engineering standpoint, you want to know what makes things work. You
Right.
want to kind of take things apart. So I really like that background and just that curiosity. But in regards to mentors, or actually even pulling back a little bit, parents. So obviously both you and I are Latinos, Latinas, and very similar for my parent. She was saying that, yeah, you're going to school. There's no
Right.
questions
There's no other option for you when you're done.
So yeah, that definitely resonates with me. So then now you get your bachelor's. So what made you continue schooling? Because when I was done with school, I was like running in the opposite direction.
I never thought about going to graduate school. That was not an option for me. My father never went to school. Just the fact that I was going through a bachelor's was such a huge accomplishment to my family as a first generation college student. And I really thought I was done. But there's been this thing in my life that I've seen pan out a couple of times very often, is that I have people that see in me something that I haven't seen myself. When I was about to graduate, it was a professor that asked me why I was not going to graduate school. And I really didn't have a reason not to do it. And I already had a job offer in Puerto Rico for one of the biggest banks working with their systems. And I was ready to accept it. And then I just said, why not? And started considering graduate school, went through the process. And once I got accepted, the thing is, like, many people don't know is that there's so many financial aid out there, especially for Hispanics going to graduate school. And when I saw what they were offering me, all of my school expenses plus a stipend so I could live while I was going to school, I was like, this is a non-brainer. They're paying me to continue my education. I'm going to do it. That was one of the biggest factors. First, somebody that saw in me the talent and the ability to be able to go to graduate school and continue with my education, something that I haven't thought for myself. And then all the help that is out there to make it happen.
We tend to be our harshest critics, and we might not see something in us, and it takes family or friends, or in your case, a professor, to say, hey, there's something in you that I can see you being successful if you continue that educational career. So I think that's awesome to really hear.
And I've always been like a learner. Like, I love to study, I love to learn. So for me, it was perfect. It's like I can continue to be in school. This is awesome. I love it. So yeah.
And like you said, and getting paid to go to school. So.
Yeah, and then getting paid. It wasn't much, but I could live, right, and continue to do this, and it has paid off, thankfully. I went to graduate school, no debt, basically, which is a huge blessing, I know.
Yeah, and especially nowadays with just school being more expensive
Right.
across the country here in the US. And yeah, coming out of graduate school without any debt is always a benefit because it helps you plan your career from whether or not you're going to buy a car, a home, et cetera. So then you left Puerto Rico to go to cold Boston. You said that you're a professor at
Hmm.
Northeastern. So that's after you attained your PhD once you became a doctor, correct?
Correct. So once I attained my PhD, all of my graduate work was towards healthcare, public health type work.
Mhm.
And right after I graduated, I got a fellowship with the VERC, which is the Veterans Engineering Resource Center, and doing like systems redesign within the hospital. And I really thought that was going to be my career path. I thought that I found what I wanted to do. My husband gets a job at Boston, so we move over there. And I start working as a postdoc in the Healthcare Systems Engineering Institute, an institute that they had inside the university. And again, I thought I was going to be there a couple of years. I was working with a lot of different hospitals. I thought, work as a postdoc for a couple of years, and then I find a position at one of these hospitals. And it was very fulfilling work because I was doing engineering, but I knew that I was having like a great impact in the lives of these patients. And for me, that's very important. Like always, the work that I do, I need to know that it's doing some good. It was very fulfilling as well. I'm working in the institute. There was this other professor that comes to me and say, have you considered teaching? And I'm like, no, not at all. I've studied engineering, but like I've never done anything in education per se. When you are doing your doctorate studies, and one of the things that they're trying to do is trying to get you to academia as well, to be a professor. And
Mhm.
there's some things that you do to prepare for that, like research, of course. And then I had to teach a couple courses, but I never saw myself as a professor. But again, this was this person over here telling me, I think you would be very good at this. Why haven't you considered it? So then I'm like, why not? And they opened a position in the department for a teaching professor, and I applied and I got it, and I was teaching for about 7 years. It was great. I enjoyed teaching so much. The academia environment is another thing, but like that experience of having the impact on these students. I went to school in Puerto Rico, so I went with a lot of Puerto Ricans that looked like me. When I did graduate school in Tampa, graduate school is more international and more diverse. There
Mhm.
was people from China, from India, from Turkey, from Colombia, from Chile. So I didn't feel as standing out, and I think I had my first experience with like really looking at how underrepresented my community is in engineering when I started teaching. And I saw all the other professors, and I saw the class composition, and I saw my Latino students getting so excited about finally getting me as a professor. I think that was the experience that really opened my eyes towards this. I've always known women are, underrepresented, but then looking at the bigger picture of Hispanics and Latinos in general as well, it was a very eye-opening experience and very fulfilling as well.
Yeah, the overall representation matters, right? And just like you mentioned, your Latino Hispanic students just being excited
Yeah.
that wow, here is a professor, very accomplished, a doctor, teaching us, talking to my network and some former guests. Representation really, really matters. Kudos to you and all the students, probably hundreds of students that you impacted during your time teaching. And it just takes one, right?
Right.
One thing that I'm doing here with this podcast is trying to look at that intersection of the value of diverse voices into cybersecurity and IT, but then also talking to people outside of this industry, trying to identify their best practices, their challenges, their wins, and kind of channel that back into the IT and cybersecurity. So it's really amazing the work that you're doing there and just the value add. So one question that I have for you, I guess what were some of the challenges, right? Being a woman in this very technical profession from a school standpoint, and then also being Latina as a professor, any challenges that you encountered and what did you do to overcome them?
I think for me, studying, like when I think back, for example, for my undergraduate degree, I think the biggest challenge for me is that I was not ready for that change from high school to college. And I thought that the same strategies that I had in high school to study and do well were going to be the same when I was in college, and that was a rude awakening. So I always tell students that it's different because I did really bad my first 2 years. Like if you see my first 2 years of my undergraduate degree, those grades are bad, are really bad. And when I had professors write letters of recommendations for me for graduate school, like all of them said, ignore the first 2 years, look at the last three, because it was a huge difference. Because it took me that long to realize that I needed to change my strategy, that I needed to ask for help. And it was okay to ask for help, that it didn't have to do anything with my ability. A lot of times I thought, I'm not good enough for this, I'm not smart enough for this, I'm gonna give up because this is not for me, I'm gonna go do something else. But realizing it didn't have to do with that, I just had to make some adjustments in the way that I was gathering my information, in the way that I was studying. Again, that is okay to ask for help. There's tutoring centers, there's professors' office hours, and you have all these resources for you that if you use them, it doesn't say that you're not smart. It's okay to need that extra help. And it made a huge difference. So in my undergrad, I would say it was that. In my graduate studies, for me, it was more like personal and mental than actually the actual courses. Like I felt once you go through a bachelor's, like those courses for a master's or a PhD, even though are obviously more demanding and more challenging, I think your bachelor's like prepare you. Again, now I had these strategies, now I knew how to study, so it wasn't that much that. It was my first time away from home, even though when I was studying I was 2.5 hours, 3 hours from my house, and I lived by myself. It was still Puerto Rico, right? It was still home. I could still jump in a car and go see my dad, go see my mom. They would still do my laundry over the weekends and stuff like that. So now you're realizing you're actually far. And if you want to see them, you have to get on a plane. If they want to see you, they have to get on a plane. Like it's not, I think that homesickness type thing hit me hard when I was in graduate school, and having to deal with that, plus the classes and all of that, was a big challenge that I had to work with. And then if you ask me now in my professional life, I think my biggest challenge is, and I think a lot of people have to deal with this, especially women that have kids, is that work-life balance. And it's particularly hard now that I work from home, which makes it harder to separate work and your personal life. That's something that I still trying to manage and work with every day. It has taken a lot of organization, a lot of prioritizing tasks, delegating, again, to the topic of asking for help. I know that as Latinos, we go into this headspace of not wanting to bother anyone. No quiero ser una carga. Like, I don't want to be a pain to anybody, or like to incomodar, like to make people uncomfortable or anything like that. But the reality is people want to help you out. And if you ask for that help, 99% of the time, they're more than willing and happy to do it. It's so true when they say it takes a village.
That's great advice, Dr. Martinez. And it's simple, right? It's just, hey, I need help with X, Y, and Z. So that definitely resonates with me. And being away from home, that homesickness as well. And it's funny with me, I was probably running away from home. Not to say that I grew up in a bad home. I wanted to explore and learn and grow as an individual. When I left El Paso, my hometown, and moving to Austin. But I think that the key thing is just asking for help. Even CEOs nowadays, they ask for help as well. In regards to your current role at SHIP, can you go a little bit, how you got involved with that organization and for our audience, just provide overall mission and vision of that organization.
It's funny because I've been involved with SHPE since I was an undergraduate student. So SHPE, like you mentioned, is the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, and basically is a national organization that is dedicated to empower Hispanic individuals in STEM fields, so science, engineering, technology, and math. We're at a very exciting time. SHPE was founded in 1974, so this year we are celebrating our 50 years. So a lot of great stuff happening, but we can talk about that later. But basically what we want to do is increase that number of Hispanic individuals in STEM fields and bridge that gap that there is in the STEM workforce when you look the percentage of Hispanics that are on STEM versus the percentage of Hispanics that are in the US population. I've been involved with SHPE since I was an undergraduate student. It was really such a big factor of what helped me succeed, persist, and then finish my degree. Like I told you, those 2 first years were rough. I really thought that I was not going to make it, that I needed to think about what else to do. Of course, dropping out of college was not an option. My mom and dad were not going to have that. So I was starting to think about what other things I could do, I could study. And I found SHPE. And in SHPE, I found a familia, I found a community. I found friends that are still my friends to this day, that just looking at them, looking that they were having the same struggles that I had, finding that support, those were my study buddies. It really made a difference. Since then, I've been involved in the organization in some way or another, particularly more at the local level. Mm-hmm. I was not really much aware of SHPE at a national level until I found that position open in 2021 when my family was relocated and I was looking at what else to do. And it's been amazing. It's been like a whole full circle moment where I've had so much that this organization has done for me. Well, I was in graduate school and I was having one of those imposter syndrome crisis moments. I won a graduate award with them. And it came with a scholarship, again, giving me that push for me to have like that self-confidence that, okay, yes, I got this, I can do it. It's been like that in so many different ways throughout my whole career. I'm super excited to be part of the staff now and working on so many great national initiatives. And some of the stuff that we do, we have a lot of programs that support our members, not only academic journey, but also in their professional careers as well. We like to start young. We have a great pre-college program called Virtual STEM Labs, which is about getting kids excited about STEM and about considering STEM as a career for them. Now we have a program for parents, for the actual parents of engineering students, so that we can give them the knowledge that they might not have because they didn't go to school themselves or don't understand, what an engineering degree is or, what it takes, and empowering them with that information so that they can better support their children, because research shows that parent support is so important for these students to succeed. And then at the professional level, also professional development and career development opportunities. So it's all the way since they're young until they're very well into their careers. There's a program, there's something at SHPE for everyone. We have the biggest gathering of Hispanic STEM individuals in the nation, which is our national convention, which is also, again, a great place to connect with others that are in your STEM field and look like you and understand you and see you and are there to support you and help you succeed.
Yeah, that's amazing. So a couple of questions in regards to SHPE, Dr. Martinez. The first one, you had mentioned the stats for Hispanic representation. By any chance, do you have that number?
We actually just released a report with the Latino Donor Collaborative. I can pass you the link later so that people know where to download it. It's called the 2023 SHPE LDCU's Latinos in Engineering Architect Report. A lot of the work that I do at SHPE is actually research and data analysis on Hispanics in STEM. And we talk a little bit about that here. Latinos are right now like 19.1% of the US population and 25% of the young Americans. Our community keeps growing, right? And that is not going to stop anytime soon. And when you look at actual engineering enrollment, back in 2021, 15.8% of those enrolled in engineering were Latinos. And that has increased. It increased by 70, almost 74% in the last decade. So we have a lot of Latinos that are going into school to get engineering degrees. And we're almost there with in parity with our overall US population. Because that's what we want to do, right? We don't want to take from anyone's, we don't want to take from anyone's pie. We want to take what corresponds to us as Latinos. When you look at the big picture, if we are 19% of the population, we should have 19% Latinos in STEM. When you look at degrees earned, right? So that's people that enroll.
Mhm.
But when you look at degrees earned, right, that goes down a little, and 13.6% of the engineering degrees earned in 2021 were earned by Latinos. Okay. It keeps going down as you go through the pipeline. And then when you look at STEM workforce, we're only 8% of the STEM workforce. There's a lot of things that we can say for each of those touch points, of course. Our goal is to bridge that gap and reach what we call parity with the overall US population.
Kind of two comments as you're describing the overall stats. The first one in regards to educating the parents. Earlier, you had mentioned financial aid for graduate school. So parents probably are not aware, and especially if they are not familiar with the language, if they don't speak English, then they're not going to have those resources. So that's awesome that SHIP is providing the education and the awareness for parents to say, oh, okay, there is money, there is opportunity to maybe get grants and obviously loans for their family to go to school. So that's definitely awesome to hear. And then the other one I think is, do you have to be an engineer to be a part of SHIP and a student?
We have different types of memberships. It goes from pre-college. So if you are a pre-college student, you could join SHIP even in high school. Then we have our student membership for undergraduate students. We have our graduate membership, and we try to make this very accessible because we don't want cost to be a barrier for you to be able to join and enjoy these benefits. So for pre-college students, it's free. For undergraduate students, it's $10, and for graduate students, it's just $15 to become a member for the year. So that's something that we always have very present in our mind. And then there's the professional membership, and you don't have to be an engineer. We now cover STEM. But the reality is the majority of our membership is in engineering. I would say like 80% engineering, 20% the STM. Then we have what is called an associate membership. So even if you're not in a STEM field and you're a STEM ally, you can join SHIP on our mission as well.
Hopefully you all get a viejito discount. So I should be there for old people there. But no, thank you, Dr. Martinez, for going over the details of SHIP. In regards to, I'm just kind of looking at my notes here. What are some, I know just recently you had your national conference. What are some new events for 2024 for SHIP that you would be able to share with us?
Apart from our yearly programs and activities, like I was mentioning, we have programs from pre-college all the way to professionals. Some of them happen in a monthly basis, but I would encourage people to go to our calendar of events to see when those are happening. But talking about big events right now in the spring, we have our regional conferences. So we have 4 of those. Those are great because even though they're smaller than the national convention, they're closer to you. You still get a lot of great professional development, networking time with companies and with other members, just at a smaller scale, which for me personally sometimes feel even better because it has that cozy, more intimate feeling to the meeting than national convention, which is huge. Also, as I was telling you, we are celebrating our 50 years, which is very exciting. And we have a set of fiestas going around the United States to celebrate. We started at the end of January in LA with our first fiesta. The next one in February is in San Francisco. And then from there, I don't remember from memory the whole calendar, but we will have 10 fiestas leading to convention, which is in November. And convention is going to be in Anaheim, again, going back to where it all started. And those are like the biggest meetings and events that we have this year.
That's awesome. I'll make sure to look at the calendar and put it on the show notes, and hopefully you all come to
Yeah,
Denver.
maybe we'll be close to you at some point.
Yeah, I can't pass up opportunity to go to a fiesta, so I love that.
Yeah.
So another topic that I wanted to get your perspective on, Dr. Martinez, is diversity, equity, and inclusion in this country. The current discussion of DEI, there's a lot of negative pushback. And another thing that you said about a pie, we're not here to take anybody's piece of the pie. The pie is big enough for everyone,
For
8
everybody.
billion people in this world
Right.
to have a piece of it. So nobody,
Right.
just because one group of individuals or women or non-binary or whatever category you define with, it doesn't mean that somebody's going to get anything less. So just your perspective on some strategies or way to identify or highlight the value of diversity when it comes to any profession. It doesn't have to be engineering, doesn't have to be cyber or IT.
I'll say not everybody, but a lot of people understand the concept, right? That diversity is good and is good business, right? Like the value of bringing different voices, different perspectives is going to bring more innovative solutions and just better outcomes. But then how do you make it happen? We have seen how many companies now recognize this and have very good recruiting efforts to recruit a diverse workforce, but it has to go beyond just recruiting. And you have to create a workplace culture of inclusivity in order to have these happen. It's not just putting a group of diverse people and hoping for the best, right? You have to create the environment for this group to be able to thrive. Some examples that I can give you, a lot of us have encountered workplace discrimination or harassment or microaggressions. Like these things happen. And it creates such a toxic environment that there's only so much that you can take. It's having to realize that those things happen and how you can remove those so that you are really creating a culture of inclusivity within your workplace.
It's about understanding and having that inclusive environment and culture. One of my first guests, she talked about the leaky pipeline. So unfortunately, some companies, and again, I'm not trying to put any blame, they do just check the box. Hey, we brought in 10 diverse candidates this month and celebrations and high fives, etc. But then through the back door, maybe 20 leave. So,
Right.
like you said, there's microaggressions. They might be ostracized for whatever reason. They might get harassed. And unfortunately, that's still happening in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So, being able to quickly address those is key, like you said, and creating an environment where I want to stay here. I want
Right.
to make that impactful work, like you mentioned, that you have found educating and bringing the next generation Latinos, Latinas into the world of engineering and STEM to bring that innovation that this country is known for when it comes to building the internet, electric cars, etc. I think you hit it, spot on. I appreciate your perspective on that. So I know typically the way I wrap things up is asking about books. I'm assuming you have a lot of books, but any that you just recently read that resonates with you that you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, of course. When I was first thinking about this, I don't have as much time to read now as I had before kids. So my reading before and after kids is very It's very different. And then I was thinking like, okay, so what have been a book that has really impacted me? And the first book, you're gonna laugh, the first book that came to mind as something, algo que me marcó de por vida. It was a math book in graduate school that I still remember to this day because I suffered that class so much. It's a book by Rudin. It's called Real Analysis. That book still haunts me to this day, not in a good way. No, but as a professor, like I knew I had that positive impact on my students and their families. The work that I do now, it's what motivates me, is what wakes me up every day, knowing that this work is so important and that even though we have done so much, there's still so much to do, right? Everyone's purpose is different. I think it does really help in waking you up every morning and having you excited about the work you do. You have to believe and really love what you're doing.
Everything that you said, all great insights, and you have been impactful to your students. I know you will continue to have that impact nationally with SHIP, and obviously, like you mentioned, the people around you, your family. One comment that I forgot to mention, and I think it's the most important job in this world, is motherhood. Trying to balance that, and I'm definitely sympathetic and empathetic when it comes to working from home. It's very similar for me. When you would actually drive to the office, that would be that buffer zone, right? You would put on your work persona. And then for me, I used to live in Washington, D.C., and that drive was horrible just because of the traffic. It would take over an hour. But then when you would leave work, you would remove your work persona and then put, okay, father, husband, and then you would have that buffer. But yeah, with the pandemic and just working at home, it makes it a little bit harder. But Dr. Martinez, this has been super educational. Thank you for all the great insight, all the work that you have done and that you will continue to do in your organization and any future organization that you decide to shift to. I know you're going to have an impact that's going to be generational. So thank you for your work. Thank you for being on the show. And I'll make sure to include even that math book.
It was the first math book that I had no numbers in it. Like, that's all I'm going to say.
I might be the one that gets that book there. I tell my kids, I'm like, look, if you can't handle the numbers, higher math just deletes numbers and start throwing letters. But again, thank you for being on the show, and look forward to continuing this conversation both in and out of the podcast.
Thank you again. This was such a pleasure. I had so much fun, and I hope, your listeners like really enjoy it.